I didn't know my name could hurt until I heard it spoken out loud in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and blood. I was still shaking from the delivery. My body felt like it had been pulled apart and stitched back together by strangers. My arms were weak, my throat dry, my head foggy from exhaustion and medication. I remember thinking that if I closed my eyes for even a second, I might disappear completely. That's when I heard it. "Rachel," the nurse said softly, smiling down at the clipboard. "They're beautiful." I smiled too. I thought she meant me. Then she looked at the bassinets. "Both little Rachels are doing great." Something inside me froze. I opened my mouth to speak, but only a thin sound came out. "What?" The nurse hesitated. Her smile faltered. Just a little. "Your mother completed the temporary paperwork while you were resting. She said you wanted to honor the family name." The room tilted. My mother stood near the window, her arms crossed, her posture relaxed, satisfied. She didn't even look nervous. She looked proud. "Oh, honey," she said when she saw my face. "You were out cold. I didn't want to wake you." I tried to sit up, pain tearing through my abdomen. "What did you do?" She walked closer, placing a hand on my shoulder like she always did when she wanted to remind me who she thought was in charge. "I named them," she said gently. "After you. It's beautiful, isn't it?" My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "No," I said, louder this time. "You didn't." She smiled. That same smile she'd used my entire life whenever she crossed a line and dared me to say something. "You'll thank me later. My name is Rachel Monroe, and my mother has never believed my life was mine." From the outside, she looked like the perfect parent, organized, involved, devoted, the kind of woman people complimented for sacrificing everything for her child. What they didn't see was how tightly her love wrapped around me. Not warm, not protective, but suffocating. Growing up, I wasn't allowed to make decisions without her approval. What I wore, who I talked to, what I studied, even how I felt. If I disagreed, she'd sigh and say, "You're too sensitive." If I resisted, she'd say, "After everything I've done for you." When I succeeded, she took credit. When I failed, she took control. I learned early that peace came from compliance. So when I got pregnant, I told myself things would be different. I was becoming a mother. I would finally be the one in charge. I was wrong. From the moment I told her about the twins, she inserted herself into everything. She insisted on attending every appointment. She corrected the doctors. She spoke over me. She called the babies my boys before they were even born. When I told her the names I'd chosen, Elliot and Noah, she didn't argue. She didn't object. She just smiled and said, "We'll see." That should have scared me, but I was tired, pregnant, hopeful. I wanted to believe she would respect this one boundary. Instead, she waited until I was at my most vulnerable. Labor lasted 36 hours. At one point, I heard a nurse say my blood pressure was dropping. I remember my vision narrowing, sounds fading in and out. I remember thinking I might not make it. And while I was fighting to stay conscious, my mother was signing papers. When the nurse left the room, I turned to her, my hands shaking as I reached for one of my sons. "You had no right," I whispered. She sat down in the chair beside my bed, crossing her legs calmly. "I'm their grandmother. I'm their mother." She tilted her head, eyes cool. "You wouldn't even be here without me." That sentence cracked something open inside me, because she wasn't just talking about childbirth. She meant my entire existence. I looked down at my sons, their tiny faces, their closed eyes, the rise and fall of their chests. They were mine, fully, unquestionably mine. And I realized something terrifying and freeing at the same time. If I didn't stop her now, she would do to them what she had done to me. Rewrite them. Control them. Claim them. I pressed the call button for the nurse. And for the first time in my life, I didn't ask my mother's permission. I remember the nurse's face when she returned. Professional but alert. The kind of alert you only see when someone senses something is wrong but hasn't been told what yet. "Yes?" she asked gently. "My mother named my children without my consent," I said. My voice shook. But I didn't stop. I was unconscious. I never approved those names. The nurse glanced at my mother, then back at me. Ma'am, is that true? Carol didn't miss a beat. She's exhausted, she said smoothly. She's emotional. We talked about this for months. I stared at her. We never did, I said. You knew my choices. You ignored them. My mother sighed dramatically, pressing a hand to her chest like she was the one recovering from surgery. Rachel, this is not the time for drama. Drama, that word again. The nurse nodded slowly. Hospital policy requires parental consent for temporary registration. If there's a dispute, there is, I said immediately. The room went quiet. My mother stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Are you really doing this right now? She snapped. After everything I've done for you? I felt tears burn behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Crying had always been her favorite proof that I was unstable. I almost died giving birth, I said, and you used that moment to take something from me. Her face hardened. I gave you life, she said coldly. You don't get to shut me out. The nurse cleared her throat. I'm going to step out and contact administration. As soon as the door closed, my mother turned on me. You are humiliating me, she hissed. Do you have any idea how this looks? I laughed, a short, broken sound that surprised even me. You named my children after me without permission, I said. How do you think that looks? She crossed her arms. Their family names. They're my children. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. You've always been dramatic, Rachel. This is why you can't be trusted with decisions. You panic. Something shifted inside me then. Not anger. Clarity. You're afraid? I said quietly. Her eyes flickered. You're afraid that if I start saying no, you won't matter anymore. She scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. But her jaw was tight. The door opened again, and two people entered, a hospital administrator and a social worker. The atmosphere changed instantly. My mother straightened, adjusting her posture, preparing to perform. They asked questions, calm, careful questions. I answered honestly. My mother interrupted constantly. I described years of control disguised as care, decisions made for me, boundaries ignored, a pattern of behavior that didn't start in that hospital room. The social worker took notes. Then came the question that cracked the room open. Did you give your mother permission to complete the registration paperwork for your children? No, I said. I explicitly told her the names I chose. My mother laughed nervously. She was overwhelmed. She's confused. The administrator looked at her. Ma'am, did you sign the paperwork as the mother? There it was. Silence stretched thin. Yes, she said finally, but only because... That is a violation, the administrator said evenly, and potentially a serious one. My mother's face went pale. This is absurd, she snapped. I was helping my daughter. The social worker looked at me. Do you feel safe with your mother involved in your children's care? I hesitated, because answering honestly meant crossing a line I'd spent my whole life tiptoeing around. No, I said. I don't. The word hung in the air. My mother stared at me like I'd slapped her. You ungrateful little, she began. Enough, the administrator said firmly. They explained next steps. Temporary suspension of visitation, review of consent violations, documentation, consequences. Real ones. My mother stood there, stunned as if no one had ever told her no before. This isn't over, she whispered to me as security gently guided her toward the door. You'll regret this. I looked down at my sons, and for the first time, I knew she was wrong. After she left, the room felt different, quieter, safer. I cried then, silent tears slipping down my temples into my hair. The social worker handed me tissues and spoke softly. You did the right thing, she said. No one had ever told me that before. That night, while the hospital lights dimmed and the hallway sounds softened, I lay awake watching my sons breathe. I replayed my childhood in fragments. The way my mother corrected my words in front of others, the way she spoke for me, the way she told people she knew what was best. I realized something painful. She didn't want grandchildren. She wanted replicas. And I wasn't going to give them to her. So while my son slept, I opened my phone and began preparing. I saved messages. I recorded voicemails. I wrote down memories I'd buried for years. Because I finally understood something my mother never expected me to realize. Love doesn't override consent, and motherhood doesn't belong to the loudest voice in the room. It belongs to the one who protects. The next morning, my phone exploded. Missed calls, text messages, voicemails stacking one after another like falling dominoes. My aunt, my cousin, my mother's best friend, people who hadn't checked on me once during my pregnancy, suddenly very concerned. Not about my recovery, not about my sons, about my mother. Rachel, what's going on? Your mom is devastated. She says you're keeping the babies from her. She says the hospital overreacted. I stared at the screen, exhaustion pressing down on my chest. This was her pattern. If she couldn't control the situation directly, she controlled the story. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on my sons. The hospital corrected the paperwork that afternoon. I watched carefully as the nurse printed the new name cards and placed them gently beside each bassinet. The names I chose. The names I whispered to them when no one else was listening. For the first time since giving birth, I felt something close to peace. It didn't last. 2 days later, the hospital social worker returned, not alone. A family services representative stood beside her, her expression serious but kind. Your mother has filed a complaint, she said carefully. She claims you're mentally unstable and being manipulated. There it was, the nuclear option. My hands trembled as I held my son closer. She says you're unfit, the woman continued, that she fears for the baby's safety. I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't just control anymore. This was retaliation. I took a slow breath. And what do you believe? She met my eyes. I believe the documentation. She gestured to the file in her hands. Screenshots, voicemails, the unauthorized paperwork, witness statements from hospital staff, evidence. For once, my mother's words weren't louder than proof. The representative nodded. We're not taking action against you. We're monitoring the situation. But you should know. She may escalate. I nodded slowly. She always does. That night, my mother sent one final message. You think you've won, but you wouldn't exist without me, and neither would they. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it to my attorney. Yes, my attorney. Because somewhere between the delivery room and that message, I had stopped hoping this would blow over, and started preparing for it to end. The hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later. My mother requested emergency visitation rights. She framed it as concern, as love, as heartbreak. She wore her best clothes to court, soft colors, gentle expression, the version of herself she reserved for audiences. I sat across from her with my sons sleeping in carriers beside me. No makeup, no performance, just facts. The judge listened, to the hospital reports, to the consent violation, to the timeline. Then she turned to my mother. You named the children without parental permission while the mother was unconscious, she said evenly. Do you understand how serious that is? My mother's lips trembled. I was trying to help. Help requires consent, the judge replied. She denied my mother's request, not temporarily, indefinitely, supervised visitation only. At my discretion, the gavel fell. And just like that, the woman who had controlled my entire life lost access. Outside the courthouse, my mother finally broke. You did this to me, she sobbed, mascara streaking down her cheeks. You turned everyone against me. I looked at her, really looked. Older, smaller, terrified. I didn't turn anyone against you, I said quietly. I stopped protecting you from your own behavior. She shook her head wildly. I'm your mother, and I'm theirs, I replied. That was the last conversation we had that year. The months that followed were quiet. painfully quiet at first. I learned how to be alone with my sons, how to trust my instincts, how to make decisions without asking permission. I moved apartments, changed my phone number, blocked half my family, not out of anger, out of necessity. One afternoon, as I rocked my sons to sleep, it hit me. She hadn't wanted to name them after me because she loved me. She wanted to erase me, to replace me, to blur the lines until she was the center again. But she failed, because I finally chose differently. Motherhood didn't make me weak. It made me dangerous. To anyone who thought they could cross my boundaries and survive it. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of her anymore. The last time I heard my mother's voice was through a voicemail she left 6 months later. I almost didn't listen to it. Her name on my screen still had the power to tighten my chest, to pull me back into a version of myself I had worked so hard to outgrow. But something in me, stronger now, steadier, decided I would listen. Not because I owed her anything, but because I wanted to know if there was anything left that could still hurt me. There wasn't. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered, thinner, less certain. Rachel, I don't know what you've been telling people, but no one answers my calls anymore. They act like I did something unforgivable. I was only trying to help. I was only trying to be included. You didn't have to go this far. She paused, sniffled. I named them after you because you're my daughter, because you belong to me too. I closed my eyes. There it was. Ownership. Not love, not remorse, not understanding. Possession. I deleted the voicemail without replying, and something incredible happened. Nothing. The world didn't collapse. My chest didn't cave in. I didn't feel guilty. I just breathed. Life with my sons settled into a rhythm that felt almost unreal at first. Midnight feedings, soft humming in the dark, tiny fingers curling around mine like anchors. No commentary, no criticism, no one telling me I was doing it wrong. I realized how loud my life had always been before, not with noise, but with pressure, with expectations that didn't belong to me, with the constant fear of disappointing someone who could never be satisfied. Now, the silence was different. It was mine. One afternoon, when the boys were about 6 months old, I took them to the park. The same park my mother used to insist we visit because it looked good in photos. This time, I sat on the grass without worrying about appearances. An older woman smiled at me as she passed. "Twins?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "They're beautiful. You must be proud." I looked down at them, one blinking up at the sun, the other chewing furiously on his sleeve. "I am," I said, surprised by how easily the words came. "More than anything." She nodded. "You're doing something right." I almost laughed, because for so long, I'd been told I was doing everything wrong. That night, after the boys fell asleep, I opened a box I'd kept tucked away in the back of my closet. Inside were old cards, letters, photos, pieces of a past I hadn't known what to do with. At the bottom was a birthday card from my mother, dated years ago. Inside, she'd written, "You'll understand one day why I do what I do." I stared at the handwriting for a long time. Then I folded the card in half and let it go. Understanding doesn't require forgiveness. Closure doesn't require reconciliation. And healing doesn't require reopening wounds just to prove you're strong enough to survive them again. My mother tried once more, through a distant relative, to ask for access. Not to me, to the boys. The answer was simple. No, not out of spite. Out of protection. Because boundaries aren't punishments. They're safeguards. And my sons deserved a life where love wasn't conditional on control. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the moment in the maternity ward, the sharp smell of antiseptic, the weight of exhaustion, the silence where my voice should have been. If I could speak to that version of myself, the one unconscious while someone else tried to rewrite her life, I'd tell her this. You're not weak for trusting. You're not cruel for taking your power back. And you're not wrong for choosing your children over the person who taught you fear. Motherhood didn't just change my life, it revealed it. My sons will grow up knowing their names were chosen with love. that their mother fought for them before they could fight for themselves. That family is not who claims you, it's who respects you. And as for my mother, she didn't get what she wanted. She didn't get ownership. She didn't get legacy. She didn't get to rewrite history. What she got was exactly what she earned: distance, consequences, and silence. The kind that finally lets someone else grow. And for the first time in my life, that silence sounds like peace.